Okay, so now to introduce our speaker for the evening, Dennis Sheppard. So Dennis Sheppard has actually been involved with the Buddhist community since 1976. Since joining the Buddhist Society of WA as a young man, interested in meditation and spiritual practice. He went on to serve multiple terms as president, as well as serving in other capacities, including designing several buildings for both the monastics and the lay community. Dennis' talks delve deep to explore reality, deep meditation, and the meaning of life. In recognition of his immense contribution to the society, Dennis has been awarded a lifetime membership. So I'm now going to give the floor over to Dennis, who will be leading the night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Loie. Well, welcome along again tonight. It's always a great pleasure to be up here and able to sort of share some practice with you. It's just interesting just listening to that little resume there that's where it sort of talks out being a young man, and I was a fairly young man when I came. I had black hair then, back in 1975, and a lot more vigour and vitality, I might say too. But my years with the Society have been really wonderful years, and it's just been fantastic to see the way that the whole thing has grown to be what it is today, and especially with the monasteries and just the depth and the purity, really, of the way that the monks and nuns are taught, the absolutely fantastic way that the monks, especially being led by Ajahn Brahm, in the way that they're sort of bringing the Buddha Dharma to the world. And really, you know, I suppose I recognised all that time ago when I first became interested in Buddhism, back in 1975, just what a very different and meaningful religion that Buddhism is. And I think we're probably all of those of us that have become involved with it would sort of see the benefits that it can bring to the world, because the Buddha was certainly a rebellious man in many ways, because the ideas and the concepts that you kind of practice with and you start to see with insight in your own meditation practice as they follow along with what the Buddha saw and realised, you kind of see that this world is really it's not really it's not what it seems, and there is probably better ways to see it and better ways of kind of using our time in this world to really understand and understand what peace is, and probably what I was just thinking about whenever I get to sort of talk like this, the idea of dukkha comes up, and I guess you all heard of dukkha, the first noble truth. But whenever I try to talk about dukkha or think about it, it's quite difficult because it seems really so alien, as the way the Buddha sort of says it's suffering, it's unsatisfactory, that's what it means, suffering, unsatisfactory, it shows stress, but in the main we all kind of think in a way, oh well, I know there's unhappiness in the world, but I'm generally happy, we can probably make it happy, and we try very hard to make this world a good and happy place. But it's not to be, is it? It just can't be that way. And that's really, with my insight, the way that I've kind of seen that over the years, is the way that our consciousness is formed, the way the consciousness that we live with has this positive and negative nature. So it doesn't really matter what we might do in the world, there will always be this dukkha there, just as the Buddha sort of saw and recognised. So understanding and sort of seeing what he meant when he was talking about dukkha is sort of very important in a way to understand what Buddhism is. But anyway, tonight, what I'd like to do to start the meditation is to, if I can, I would like to lead a little bit of the meditation as we're doing it, and again to really start off with practicing with the Satipatthanas. So the 4 Satipatthanas, and the first one is really just being mindful of feeling, just knowing what feeling is. Second one is Ajahn Brahm. Over the years, he's sort of more and more developed this second one, this feeling, understanding the feelings in your body. You might notice that when he leads these meditation sessions, he usually does spend a fair bit of time in going through the body, just so that we all can get that feel for what it is to feel into your body, because this is very important. Because the third Satipatthana, the Satipatthana just basically means it's the foundations of mindfulness. It means the foundation of mindfulness. And the third Satipatthana is really being mindful of mind. And that's really what I'd like to try and just direct you a little bit to in the meditation, just to understand that. And then the fourth Satipatthana, of course, is understanding and seeing and feeling. Again, this felt experience of mindfulness, just feeling the way that consciousness flows, the way that it creates phenomena. So the fourth Satipatthana is noticing and seeing, feeling the phenomena that come into the mind itself. So you've got first foundation of mindfulness is just knowing that feeling is important, understanding what feeling is. And then the second one is just to look at feelings in your body. The third one is looking at the feelings that are around mindfulness of mind, understanding what your mind really is, to feel it. You can feel it in your body. And the fourth one is the phenomena of seeing, noticing, and experiencing, and being with being able to get insight into the phenomena of mind as our mind and the world is created within, in the stillness of mind itself. So I'd invite you all to just to find your nice, comfortable meditation posture. Closing your eyes, closing your mouth, and just breathing through your nose. Just letting the tongue rest lightly against the palate. And just making this little affirmation to start with, that we are going to now, we are going to be mindful through this period of meditation for the next 30 minutes or so. So just finding yourself, finding your posture, getting yourself comfortable. Just finding the nice energy, the right energy in your body. Nice straight back if you can, without it being like a ramrod, but just nicely balanced. And then just breathing through your nose. And just be aware of any feelings or any thoughts that come into your mind, so that you can then just really let them go. Just especially the thoughts, just letting any thoughts that are coming in. Just notice the thought and let it go. Let it be. So that you're just settling into this wonderful posture. You can always use your breath as an anchor. But the main part of the exercise here is just to really let your mind be as empty as it can be. It is possible, as you're starting to concentrate into this practice, to actually start to pre-cognise even a thought when it's coming, so that you're actually there at the door of the mind before the thought can even come in. But certainly if the thought is there, just to stop the thought and let it go. Just come back to the sitting. You're already really starting to notice how the body is starting to relax. And to help this along, we can just maybe turn our attention right down to the base of our feet and maybe feel into the toes. You can pick a toe to feel into, whether it's the little one or up to the big one. And if you need to just have some idea of what it feels like, it's always allowable just to wriggle them a bit, or even try and feel what the toes are like, feeling what they're feeling like through your socks if you're wearing socks, or on the carpet. Just noticing what the sensation of it in your toe is like. And then move the attention across the arch of your foot into your heel. Sometimes I even notice on my heel the sort of the callus build-up that's sometimes around there. But then just allowing your attention to flow on to the ankles. Always interesting just to notice how it's articulated, how your foot can just work at the end of your leg. And then moving up through the lower part of your leg, through the shins and the calves. Again, feeling into there, you can quite often just notice and feel what it's like to feel the hard part of your shin compared to the softness of the floppy calf muscle behind. And then just bringing your attention up through your knees. Again, the way they bend and articulate. And up into the thighs. There always seems to me there to be a feeling of strength. Feel the big muscles of the thighs. And then as they connect into the bottom trunk of your body, you can feel where you're sitting, you can feel your sitting posture, feel the pressure on the seat, on your bottom. And as you're running through these feelings, just allowing it all to relax. And moving up from your bottom into the lower back. Just seeing if you can feel that little bend, that little curvy part at the base of the spine, which is always a pretty good indication that your back is nice and straight. That you've got all the muscles there working to sort of hold it up right. And then in around the tummy. There's usually plenty of sensation in there, inside the tummy, with all of the stuff that's going on in there, the way that the bowels and all of the intestines are kind of working, and moving to push nutrients and food and blood through your body. Then moving up into the chest. Again, there are always plenty of little things to feel in your chest. And oftentimes as you're feeling there, feeling maybe the heart rhythm or the way even the little valves and so on are kind of moving and working, some of that movement that you can feel. And it does always help I always sort of like just to bring myself back to a sense of gratitude really for the way all these systems in our bodies work, and have done so for many, many years and continue to just work away. And we can feel really grateful that we are here alive at this particular point in time. Then moving up to the upper back and round the shoulder blades. Then down through the arms, the upper arms, and through the elbows, where the elbows are bent, into the forearms and then into the wrists, and then again into the hands and the fingers. And at this point I always like to just linger a little bit around the fingers, because there's always lots of nerve endings in your fingers. And I'm hoping that you might, like me, just feel in your fingers a little tingling. Can you feel that, the tingling that's there? And that's there because you are starting to relax. You're starting to relax well enough to be able to notice that tingling there in your fingers. Because really then if you want to investigate a little further with that, you can take that tingling, maybe just like take a mental photograph of that tingling and then maybe come back to your thigh. And you'll notice there then that this tingling is there too. And then you'll kind of notice that it's all over your body. This tingling. And if you can start to feel that well, it's always a good indication that you're starting to relax. You're starting to feel more deeply into your body. And then moving up through the neck and into the head area, around the eyes, around the mouth especially too, where there's always again plenty of nerve endings there. But then maybe even up around the top of the head and even maybe out just beyond the top of your head. I wonder if you can feel sensation there. All around this area there's plenty of scope for very, very subtle feeling that can happen. Very subtle vibrations. And some of them, like the vibrations that are there to identify the mind, are primordial. They have been there for such a long time. from lifetime to lifetime. And oftentimes as you're looking at these vibrations too, you might think, oh, that's very familiar, I know that, I maybe haven't taken notice of it, but I do know that, it's familiar. Because these feelings are always with us, especially mindfulness of mind. Mindfulness of mind is always there. And now if you're feeling like you're settled into your body fairly well, you can just bring your attention to the breath. And we're just using the breath here now as a sensation. It's a sensation that's taking place in the present moment. And you can feel that breath as you're breathing in and then breathing out. This is being aware of that sensation. And remember just to keep the mind still. We're really looking to try and understand this stillness, because this stillness is really a reflection of the pure mind itself. The pure mind itself is really built from still consciousness. And then just as we're settling into the mind, and just becoming aware of the stillness that it's producing for us, we can just maybe reflect a little on the hindrances that stop us from coming to this point all of the time. And you'll probably remember that there's 5 hindrances, and the first 2 are a pair, or the first 4 are really 2 pairs. But the first hindrance is just simply desire, wanting to get something. Being distracted into some feeling or wanting, desiring. But you'll notice that that's not there right now. And the second hindrance is aversion, wanting to get rid of, the exact opposite of desire. Aversion, wanting to get rid of something, wanting to get rid of maybe pain in your body or something troublesome. But you'll notice now that that's not there either. The desire and aversion are now not causing you trouble in your meditation because your mind is still. And with that stillness, what you feel, or what I'm perhaps suggesting, or certainly it is for me, when it's desire and aversion aren't there, is contentment. My mind becomes content. And I trust that is how it is for you now. So you can know this contentment. Not trying to get anything, I'm not trying to push anything away. And then the third and the fourth hindrance, as I say, are a pair as well. The third hindrance is restlessness, and the fourth hindrance is sloth and torpor. But again, you'll notice in your mind now that restlessness is not there. Usually when there's contentment there, the mind is satisfied. It's not trying to get up to move or run away. We are just content to be here with this breath, this beautiful breath. And we're not going to sleep. We're not sort of drifting off or moving into any torpor or trance. So the energy is balanced. And if you're feeling good in your body's nice and straight, it's kind of indicating to you that your energy is balanced now. And what does that feel like? What does it feel like when your body is working like this? When your mind is still, content, your energy is balanced, also content. And then the fifth hindrance is really just simply doubt. But I'm hoping and trusting that doubt is not coming into your mind just right at the moment. I'm trusting that you'll be able to sort of see that balance of energy that's there, just with this little bit of meditation. And the contentment that's there. As you're just allowing yourself to settle into the stillness of your mind. So I'll leave you be just for a few minutes now anyway, to just allow you to just reflect on what's happening for yourself. The way there's all that's feeling, the way your mind is quite relaxed and balanced, content. So in a moment I'm going to ring the bell, and I'll do that 3 times. And I would invite you just to keep your eyes closed over that period, the period of the resonance of the ringing of the bell, and just reflect on what that feels like now compared to when you started, before we went into this meditation practice. And just reflecting too on the Satipatthanas. Just reflecting on what feeling is, and how feeling is when you can notice it in your body. And then the mindfulness of mind, pure mind, still mind. And then the phenomena of mind that fills up that stillness. But we'll talk a little bit more about that during the talk. Felt very nice in the room anyway, so I hope that that was beneficial for you. But I'd probably like to, just during the talk tonight, just probably stay in and around the Satipatthanas, just what mindfulness is, and just noticing how we can use that to good effect in trying to be with and understand the Buddha's teachings. And probably the most difficult part of the teachings too, in bringing our attention around to what is in fact what the Buddha talked about as right view, the very first factor in the Eightfold Path. Just the right view, because right view is something really that needs to have the present moment with it, to be there in the present moment with that mindfulness. Because the present moment, I can just maybe start off just by saying that the present moment is in fact a constant. It's there all of the time. And I don't think it really takes too much to sort of think about this as we're investigating our mind and investigating the world and the universe and the way it all comes to be. But the present moment is a very important component of really all of that. Without the present moment, there really nothing really works in the way that the Buddha talked about it. So the Buddha he wasn't championing space and time as a reality. He was really pointing all the time to the present moment to find reality. You probably remember the Buddha's story. It's a wonderful story too, really, the way that he came out of his palace, where he had lived his life in a fair degree of opulence, a fair degree of hedonism, I imagine too. Allowed himself to have the very best of what was available at that particular time in the foothills under the Himalayan mountains there. So he had that advantage of being a prince in that way, that he was able to sort of have the best that the world offered. But then when he went into his monastic practice, it didn't really take him long to sort of move past all of that and to really want to try and figure out whether being an ascetic was the right way to go, because he could see that he wasn't really in sort of becoming involved in the space and time world that he'd been involved in as a prince. He kind of knew that wasn't really cutting the mustard for him. It didn't really allow him to see deeply enough into his life to be able to understand what this universe was about. So that's why he sort of went into this ascetic kind of thing, and he was a very good ascetic too. He built up quite a following of people around who were practicing in the same way. But after a while, the Buddha too realised that ascetic practice wasn't he could see that both of those paths that he'd been on were extremes. And then it came to his mind, well, what about the present moment? What say if I try the present moment? Try to practice in that way. And really that's what in the end did it for him. He managed to build up his body. By that time his body had become quite wasted when he was at the height of his asceticism. He was very probably ill and, well, it says in the sutras, near death. So he built himself up again and then started to practice what he called the middle way. So this is the middle way between extremes. And we're really talking here about the present moment. We're not talking about the past, because everything in the past is sort of dead and gone, isn't it? We can all sort of notice and see that. And the future, well, that's a speculation. It's something that's yet to come. There's no reality there. So the Buddha was starting to see then that the only reality, where reality really lies, is right in the heart of the present moment. So, and this is of course where it's a bit of a paradox really, because probably in some ways he was practicing that way anyway. His meditation would have been taking him towards that. But somehow or other we do seem to find that very difficult to come to terms with, because this world that we live in here is just so compelling. It kind of seems so real. When we're living in it, you know, it's almost... That's why I kind of talk about the Buddha as being a rebel, because, I mean, to criticise this world and, you know, and all our efforts to try and make the world perfect, to try and get rid of the dukkha that he talked about. And I guess at some level, most of us still think that we can do that. That dukkha itself can be fixed. You know, that's really the governments around the world, probably the good governments anyway, certainly the ones that are working towards the benefit and the happiness of their people. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make a perfect world for us all to live in. But the fact is that it just can't really happen. And that's really because of this consciousness that we live with, this conditioning, the conditioning of consciousness. And the consciousness itself, you start to see a little bit of that with the idea of the mindfulness of mind there, because it's actually consciousness that's bringing the mind into being. The way that I like to think about it or experience it, my insight into that is really, because when I hear that, when I kind of notice that vibration of mind, I kind of see it as like an iteration. It's something that's beginning and ending so very fast. The Buddha talked about this as, you know, being beginning and ending countless times in the wink of an eye. It was really just astonishing in the way that the Buddha kind of could see the way this world sort of aggregated itself, the way the world sort of builds itself up. If we get some time, maybe I'll look at the 5 aggregations a little bit with you too, as well as all the wonderful teachings that he's given, the 12 factors of dependent origination, they all sort of fit, it all kind of fits together in the end, the Buddhist teachings, when you start to investigate it and look at it. But you see that these beginnings and endings, because consciousness would probably be that is probably the fastest resonance that we can feel in our body. But you feel that in the way, as I say, that it begins and ends. It's a beginning and ending, an iteration. And you can feel that buzzing vibration, humming vibration, that's right there, that's sort of indicating this is the mind. It's the purity of it, is stillness. It's the mind that hasn't yet got any phenomena. It's the matrix of the phenomena that comes to be built. Built as the universe. So, but that humming vibration is very palpable. It's there all of the time. You can sort of see it without, well, I wouldn't say without trouble, but I mean, with most people, I think, that sort of see it, they realise that once you start to twig it, you see that it's a very familiar resonance. But it's so fast. But then, other aggregations sort of are maybe longer or at bigger scales. I mean, I don't know that anything's longer, because consciousness has always got to be there to make all the scales of the universe, the scales of phenomena that's built in the universe. Those scales get bigger and bigger, of course, right out to a universe, right out to the beginning and ending of a universe. But I mean, I quite like just to look in my own life. I like to just, certainly around birth and death and the rebirths that's so important to Buddhism. A lot of people still wonder about it. Does rebirth really happen? Is that really true? But you can see that it's true once you start to see this mind. You see the mind and the way that the stream of the consciousness is just flowing through all of the time. And as it flows through, it's picking up all of these aggregations and building bigger and bigger systems, if you like, maybe a bodily system. How many? There's 11 main systems in our body. If you sort of look at the skeletal system and the pulmonary system, the breathing cycles and everything like that, there's 11 main systems there, but they all come together. They come together in a way symbiotically to build themselves up. But it's all just an amazing thing, the way that this consciousness builds all of this phenomena that's there for us to notice. But as you're kind of realising that these scales in the universe get bigger and bigger, because I always think about the Buddha, because he talks about the consciousness being, so fast, countless times in the wink of an eye, it's iterating. But then when his monks asked him where consciousness began, and the Buddha said, I've been back over 24 kalpas. A kalpa is a universal cycle. A universal cycle is a long, long time. We're 14,000 million years now into this system now. But, to be able to sort of, to know that, to have the confidence to know that, back over 24 of these universal cycles, these are huge, huge scales, astronomical time. Probably some of the things that Drew has been talking about in the talks that he's been doing over the last couple of years, right from the time of the dinosaurs up to his last talk, where we're looking more at future, and what life, where he was looking more at what life was like and would be like in the future. But there is these scales that are there, and we can notice them, and you can notice this flow of the consciousness that's moving through us all of the time. So you can notice, a breath. How long does a breath take? A breath goes in, goes out, maybe a second, few seconds. And then maybe think of something else, a day. A day lasts a day. and then a week and a year, and then you can think about a lifetime, a beginning of a life and the ending of a life. But then there's always the inevitable rebirth, and you start to see how that's a continuum. There's a continuum in the way that the mind works, the way that the mind flows. And just maybe coming back to just a couple of I don't want to get too deeply into the technicalities of it all because it does get a bit tedious, really. But the second factor in the first factor in the 12 steps of dependent origination is ignorance. You know, we're ignorant of all of this, really. That's why we just get lost in it. But the second factor is sankharas. So, and what a sankhara is, what the Buddha said a sankhara is it's like a karmic pattern that gets built up. So all of these systems are built up karmically, they're habitual. It's conditioning, habitual conditioning that's there, and it's there all the time. The karmic patterning is there even when we die because the mind stream is still there. Certainly our body has died and that's gone and finished, come to an end, but the mind stream's still flowing through. And it's built up with these karmic patternings, the sankharas as the Buddha called them. Sankharas, and they're there ready all the time just to bring the universe back, because this universe is continually being built in our mind. He can. I was just thinking that the sankharas themselves, they're built by the consciousness that flows. So this is really where we're looking at the third Satipatthana, which is the purity of mind. Then the fourth Satipatthana is the phenomena of mind. This is where the phenomena of mind is starting to flow, starting to move. And that's the third factor of dependent origination, the flow of consciousness. So the flow of consciousness flows over the sankharas, and then it goes on to create a body and mind, and then goes on to create the five senses. So all this is happening every moment, all of the time. And it's not really that you kind of can just look at it and say, oh yeah, I see that, I see this moment being made, or that, because it's all happening. It's more like an insight that you get. And when we're lucky enough to have the Buddha's teachings there to allow us to sort of see and understand what it is that we're looking at here, it just makes it so much easier, and then you start to see how important the idea of past lives are, because we've all had countless past lives. Quite often Drew and I will sort of talk about things that have happened in the past, but he bought me Drew's a real suitor man. He likes to look at the suitors. And he'll often bring me a sutta around where, the Buddha's talking about we've had that many lives as pigs, and the birth and the death of the pig, the killing of the pigs, there's enough, the blood that's come from all of that is enough to fill an ocean. Some of the suttas are reporting, some of the words of the Buddha in the suttas reporting. So these kind of things are really very, very real, but they only become real when your mind gets still. You only start to see these insights or get these insights when the mind becomes still enough to penetrate into it all. When the mind is still, it really does penetrate into the phenomena, because the phenomena is all built from this consciousness. So the consciousness can always penetrate into it. And that's what gives you the insight. The consciousness, as it's penetrating in, it gives you the insight to be able to see what the Buddha's teachings mean, the way that these 12 factors of dependent origination do work, the way that the consciousness flows over the sankharas to build the body and mind, and then to build the five senses, and then to go on and develop the contact and the feeling, and so on, to sort of continue on to build everything that we really have. And really and truly it isn't that much different today as to what it was in the Buddha's day. The same sort of things we would be realising, the Buddha would be realising back then, as what we can see now. And I guess that was Drew's point too in his talk. You know, in the future, if we're living on Mars or that, the same thing will still be there. So this present moment becomes a very important thing for us to understand and be with. Just to be with that stillness. And that stillness is there all of the time, so we can always know what it is. And the other thing about the stillness, the still consciousness, that is really important to sort of see, is that the stillness is the energy that makes everything work. The stillness, this is the 0 point energy. You know, the physicists talk about this as 0 point energy of the quantum. But this stillness, you can see the way that it sees. You know, that's how it feels for me. I don't know for you, but it seems to seethe in your mind. And when it seethes, you can see the way that this positive and negative consciousness is coming together and fusing and creating this energy. You can feel the energy there, the still energy. It's just all still energy there. It hasn't. At that point, it's forming a matrix for the phenomena, the flow of consciousness to move in. And then the flow of consciousness comes out of that stillness. And there's infinite energy in there. There's an infinity of energy that can just come out of that and allow us all to, to live the lives the way that we're living them. So this sort of brings us to the point then of really what the Buddha was talking about really when he's talking about enlightenment and how to make that work for yourself. Once you start to see that, once you start to see the mind, the third Satipatthana, once you start to see how that works, then you can turn your attention to it. You can start to meditate into it, to absorb into it. And the more you absorb into it, you'll notice that the consciousness has the tendency to stop. It finishes, just ends. And that's really the way that, I think physicists see the world anyway. Like if you sum all of the sum of all the energy in the universe comes to zero. There's really nothing there. I mean, and even just in the world, in this world now, when you look at some of the wonderful work that physicists have done, like Einstein's special relativity and general relativity, that's sort of showing us very clearly that this space and time is not what it seems. Space and time can sort of move and change, and a black hole can sort of cut time right off. Anything that's massive, a massive body of energy can sort of make sure that it can actually finish with time. The same as when you travelling very fast at the speed of light. Einstein realised that if he hopped onto a photon of light, he could cross the universe in no time. So all of these things are analogous to what we're talking about here with the Buddha. We're talking about a universe that's very tenuous. It's not. There's no real reality there. We might think that there is, and it might even in some ways feel like it's real. In fact, because you do have to be a little bit careful. I often like to tell the story of the Zen monk who went to a restaurant and he was waxing lyrical, like I'm doing here now, waxing lyrical about the emptiness of the universe, and of course the restaurateur who was going to provide the food for this, it was a Zen monk providing food for him. He was starting to get a bit sick of what this monk was talking about. So anyway, he went back out to the kitchen, came back with an empty plate, and he put the plate in front of the monk and said, "There, then eat that." And that's kind of, I guess that sort of brings you back to the way that we are now. I mean, we are as we are now, and we need to work with what we've got, work with our bodies and minds the way that they are. But these realities, the reality of, or you might talk about it as a veridical reality, a reality that you kind of, where you're seeing, we're not like blind men trying to feel an elephant and understand what an elephant is. When veridical reality is there, you're kind of seeing it all. You see it all. The Buddha sees it all. He's the one who knows. And when he moves into this enlightened state, there's what he calls supramundane consciousness there. Supra meaning that he's overlooking, he's seeing it all for what it is. And then he can just let it go. So that's where we're heading to. And it's a bit, when I first started to realise this, it makes me feel a bit, it made me at the beginning anyway, probably even now if I'm honest about it, it's scary. And oftentimes you get a feeling of this, when you're kind of there and you might be, something might have happened to you, but you've got this opportunity to look into the void of this truth, because it is there for us all really to realise. But when you look into that void of truth, it can be quite scary. Quite scary to let go. But with practice and being able to sort of work with it all of the time, you do get to the point where you can start to let go, just as the Buddha did. And the Buddha, when he did let go, his mind became extinguished. But he was happily, though, able to, there's all sorts of conundrums that we can talk about there, and I won't go too far into that, but even though his mind was extinguished, he still lived on for another 40 years. So how did he do that? How did that happen? How can you have an extinguished mind, an extinguished being, because he was no longer Siddhartha Gautama. It was really after that Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. He gave himself that epithet of the Buddha, the one who knows. But how does that work? You really, and that really only comes about when you kind of have got the insight, when you can sort of penetrate deeply into this consciousness and just see the way that it all works, and to see the way that everything, every particle, every bit of your being is in contact with this energy that's beyond space and time, unmeasurable. You're not possible to even measure it. It's infinite. So that's really the way that all of that is working. But what I might do is just leave my comments at that, and just see if there's any questions that we might be able to sort of work with, just as we explore this a little bit more. Because really, when I'm doing this, it's always using the 7 factors of enlightenment, the way that the Buddha used those, and that's just simply mindfulness. Again, mindfulness is a very important thing, just being mindful, and then mindfulness, and then investigation of the mindfulness, or using your mindfulness to investigate just the way that we're doing now, and then realising the energy and being able to sort of feel that the wonderful, just as we were talking about at the start, that wonderful relaxation, the beauty, that joy that comes when you're able to just be peaceful, to be at peace. Yeah, so anyway, using those 7 factors, we kind of move through the practice. But anyway, is there any questions on what I've talked about so far?
Yeah, my question is about Sankhara and
Sankharas?
And the whole entire deal about noticing your own cycles of self-misery. in the sense of how you generate your own misery, and how you began to notice that slowly but surely through insight, and how you began to, I guess, categorize or like begin to see like, oh, I'm getting really angry at this person or that person, or I'm feeling really good for some reason, whether it be good or bad, like misery, because, you know, the goodness ends and in the badness starts. So my question would be, how did you begin to integrate that wisdom into your own life, I guess?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not saying that I've integrated that perfectly just yet. I practice this all of the time, but
No, that's fine.
it's always an ongoing work in progress. But well, again, just using those 7 factors of enlightenment it's a good way to progress through what you're talking about there, because if we start off again with the mindfulness is just so important to really, because we're using concentration as well, which is further along in this. I'll just explain that in a minute with the 7 factors, but the mindfulness there is right at the start, and that gives you the context for everything. Mindfulness is always a contextual thing, and then you can start to investigate into these things. And just as you said, it's very good for you to say, you know, where's this pain coming from, and then you start to notice your conditioning and the way that you've been conditioned. And this is even where, you know, certainly in my kind of world as or past world anyway, as a hypnotherapist, I've kind of seen a lot of clients who come to me with troubles, just as you're talking about there, with trying to sort of understand them and realising that they may be, there's a past life perhaps involved, which oftentimes there is in some of the troubles that we have in this life. So, you know, there's ways of investigating like that, but even just your own meditation will sort of take you to all of these things. So the investigation is very important, but then just looking with the way that the energy works, and then the 4th factor here is really just looking at the way that all of that, the way that you can develop rapture and joy out of the whole thing. You're kind of really starting to, rather than it being something you don't want to go towards, you're kind of starting to really head into it. You're starting to develop into it. And then once you start to do that, you start to bring about tranquility. The tranquility starts to come into your mind. And that's, you know, just the beautiful, all that joy starts to settle a little bit more, starts to settle into that wonderful, it's a subtle joy and happiness that's there with the stillness, with that tranquility that's there. The stillness is always there, but now your mind's really becoming quite tranquil. And then as the mind tranquilises like that, then it can start to concentrate. It goes very deep. And that's, you know, in Buddhist terms we call that samadhi. And then following the concentration, you move into equanimity. And that's the 7th factor of enlightenment, equanimity. And then once you're able to hold the equanimity there, there's probably how the Buddha did it, I imagine, holding the equanimity in place while the world is sort of going on around him. And then gradually he starts to penetrate, that stillness starts to penetrate into the world itself. And then he gradually, bit by bit, starts to see what's happening behind it all. And it's a gradual process. It'd be very rare that someone could just sort of, you know, come into meditation and then just sort of do a bit of meditation and then become enlightened straight away. It's a sort of a gradual process of realisation. And I think that was probably true for the Buddha too. He had many, many past lives. I mean, it's quite wonderful to sort of to listen or to read the suttas, you know, of the various past lives that he had, because, you know, he was certainly a remarkable person. You know, I think he must have been really to, you know, to do all this at the time that he did it, 2,500 years ago, in that particular era. But yeah, it's always possible to do. But anyway, that's what I would recommend you follow, the seven factors of enlightenment. If you sort of follow that through, that's really what it is that allows you to sort of start to penetrate into your own pain, your own kind of troubles, and you know, whatever the frustrations. And really, you know, in the way the world's going today too, with the anxieties and the depression, it's really the same thing. I mean, I suppose you've got to be a little bit careful as you're meditating if you're going, you know, if you've already got this fully blown into your life, you know, a depression or an anxiety, you've got to, you know, it's always wise to sort of use a lot of loving kindness, meditation, things like that, so you can build yourself up. Just in the same way that the Buddha did when he was so weak in his ascetic practice. He was lucky enough to have his karma was there anyway for him to attract that lady that brought along the milk rice. Her name has just gone out of my head for the moment, but anyway, she was a wonderful boon for his life, you know, to come along and feed him milk rice. Someone knows the name? Ah, good on you, Bill. Of course, Bill would know it. Yeah, Sujata. So, is that enough?
Yeah, no, that's a really good thought to take away. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Drew.
Hi Dennis, thanks for the kind reference in your talk.
I thought I'd bring you to it, Drew.
It's like an academia, you know you've made it when other people are referencing your papers. But I haven't made it, so I've got this question. In the Sankharas, could you elaborate on the difference between mindfulness of mind and consciousness? Because it's very subtle from where I'm sitting, and maybe you could elaborate a bit. Thanks.
Well, the mind is really made of consciousness. It is consciousness. But the way that I see it, the way that this experiences for me is that this consciousness, as I say, it sees. So it's coming into my mind, the way I see it's coming into my mind as positive and negative consciousness. And it's not, at that point, it's not fully formed. And consciousness itself is a conditioning. It's a condition. So it's not like an end to things. Consciousness finishes. Or consciousness can finish if you let it finish. But if you don't let it finish, it just stays in samsara and just goes on forever and ever. It's beginningless and it's endless. So the way to see it, I think, is that this consciousness sees with positive and negative, and that's building the dukkha. Consciousness is dukkha. You could really say that. Consciousness is dukkha. And the Buddha said that I teach two things in this world, the beginning of dukkha and the ending of dukkha. And so really you could probably say, maybe Ajahn Brahm might sort of criticise me for this, but you could probably say that consciousness is the beginning and ending of dukkha. Well, it is. It is like that. There's no kind of question about that, really. That is, consciousness brings dukkha into our lives, and when it finishes, when you can cause it to finish, when you can practice well enough to sort of allow the whole process to finish, then consciousness stops, and that's where enlightenment is. This is where the deathless is, where the Buddha talk. There's that wonderful, I always probably say this in just about every talk that I've given here, but there's this wonderful stanza that the Buddha talked about. I think it's verse 24 of the Dhammapada, but it goes like this. It goes, heedlessness is the pathway to death. Heedfulness is the pathway to the deathless. Those that are heedless are forever dying. The heedful do not die. So what does that mean? The heedful do not die. So what he's sort of talking about there is when consciousness finishes, the only thing that the Buddha has there is just the awareness of that finish. The awareness of the finish, and he talks about the deathless, that deathless place where there's, because I'm just aware that even talking like this, some people might sort of start thinking, well, good, that's not. I've been practicing all those years for that. It's not, it might not necessarily sound too attractive, but this is where true peace is. This is when Heidi and I was watching a film last night, I just even forget the name of it now, but there was this lady that was fighting with one of her friends, and the friend asked, well, what do you want in your life? What do you want? And she said, I want peace. I want peace. Went on to say it about 5 times, I want peace. Not talking about happiness, because, if you're thinking about happiness or any other of those kinds of feelings, whenever you sort of bring the idea of happiness into your mind, there's always the unhappiness that goes with it. So you can't, and that's why dukkha is the way that it is. So when consciousness finishes, it finishes with dukkha. So, Drew, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question there, so...
not really.
Put me back on the track. Where am I?
Okay, so could I summarise am I guessing that the difference between mindfulness of mind and consciousness is that mindfulness of mind, perhaps in a meditation, is observing the second to second, say, thoughts that are arising in mind, whereas consciousness is more like the whole phenomena, the whole sort of river flow. Is this the difference between the two? What's the difference between the two?
The difference between the two, the third Satipatthana is still. The third Satipatthana is providing the matrix. It's the mind itself, providing the matrix of the mind. And inside that matrix, you have all of this power, because this consciousness that's been fusing together. You can even probably say, if physicists were talking like this, they would talk about it as coming together and annihilating, and sort of, and the way that the physicists like to see those big explosions and the atomic bombs and all, and even that. So even the atomic bombs and all of that they all come out of the emptiness. They come out of the stillness, the still energy. That's the still energy of the quantum that all of that comes out of. All of that energy, it's infinite in there. So, but this is still in the realm of, for what the Buddha's talking about here, it's still in the realm of the third Satipatthana, which is the mindfulness of mind. It's only when consciousness starts to flow that thoughts start to come, thinking and creations, thoughts and creations. They come in the fourth Satipatthana. That's the flow. That's when the flow of energy is moving over the sankharas to sort of create the body and mind and the five senses and so on. Is that clearer or not?
Yes, but it could go on all night, so I'll leave it for someone else to ask a question. But mindfulness of mind, you're saying, is stillness, and the fourth consciousness is the flow.
The flow. Yeah, the fourth Satipatthana is the flow of consciousness. Third Satipatthana is the stillness, the mindfulness of mind.
Hi Dennis, I'm Lisa, I'm a clinical psychologist, so I'm curious about your comment earlier about as a hypnotherapist and past life impacting on current life.
Could you just say that again? I didn't quite catch it.
Oh,
yeah, that's better. That's better.
Oh, sorry. I'm Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I was interested in your comment earlier as a hypnotherapist and observing past lives impacting on current lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
What
you've noticed, how you observe it.
Okay, well, it's been really a very interesting time. As I've been doing this since I learned how to do this from a very wonderful man who taught me back in 2004, I think it was. And so I learned, and it took me quite a while to become confident enough to be able to sort of do this kind of work with people too. But I would find as people got to know about what I was doing, they would come and with all sorts of melodies that they had. Like, for instance, this is a story that I've told a few times here at the Buddhist Society and also at a conference once. But there was a man in Bunbury that came to me. He sort of just heard about me, and he wasn't a Buddhist. But he developed this pain in his stomach. And he'd been to every sort of doctor, and there was nothing that they could find that was wrong with him. He didn't have, but nonetheless, this pain was there for him. And he was a very hard client too, because it took me a long time to get him. He easily went into trance, but it took a long time for him to be able to speak about what he was seeing. I knew he was seeing things in his mind. You can usually, because the REM movement of people's eyes when they're in a trance, you can see them, see the way the thoughts are going in his. But I was just about ready to sort of stop, to give up. But then all of a sudden, he's sitting in my chair, and then all of a sudden he just sort of kind of sprung to life. It was sort of quite amazing. He was just up and, "Oh," he said, "there's ships over there, there's men fighting over here, there's people over here, they're doing this over here." And he goes, "Ah!" He goes, "Oh, I've just got a spear in my guts." And so I nearly fell off my chair. I was actually, God, just about knocked me for a six. But he after that, with the spear, I asked a few more questions around what was happening, because he started that thing off by saying that he could feel himself swinging in a hammock. He was in a hammock on a ship, and he could sort of feel and then all of a sudden he went into this this scene of fighting on these islands somewhere, and. But anyway, as you do with these sorts of things, what I do then is to sort of settle them down, settle the client down again, and just ask, because I never make any assumptions myself about, because it might have been fairly obvious that the spear in his stomach might have been something to do with the pain that he had there. But I would never, I can't really make that call. It's really him that has to make that for himself. So I kind of put him back into a trance and sort of brought him down to be quite still again. And then I asked permission to speak with his subconscious mind, which he gave me. And then I just asked him, is this anything to do with the story that anything to do with the pain in your stomach? Which, he just said, yes, it is. So I use the usual thing with that. You just sort of ask, well, can you fix it? Can it be fixed? And which he said, yes, it can be. Because whenever you do things like this with people, it's like a catharsis. Once they've kind of seen it, because all these traumas, they're just like little soap bubbles. Once they're popped, there's nothing there. It's all gone. But nonetheless, that story had been in his mind all these years. And there's lots of, I've had lots of clients like that are, down through the times that I've been doing this, where those sorts of issues are there, where people have this trauma sort of trapped inside them, And you know, hypnosis can be quite a good way to allow someone to penetrate into it, to investigate into it, and sort of see. But again, with good meditation, you can sort of start to do this for yourself too. But there's lots of stories that I could tell you like that if you're kind of interested, and they are kind of interesting stories too. But lots of our members have had different past lives that we know about now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I've gathered a fair bit about observation from your talk and observing the self and then coming to realizations. I guess I think that you expounded quite well on the First Noble Truth and how the dukkha from everything and how vast it is and how it's empty and everything. But I'm curious about your view on craving, perhaps the other noble truths, and because I felt like there's the observation, but I feel like there's something that's a bit more active, and I'm curious about that. Like, is there something we do with craving? I remember there's somewhere about Buddha talking about the good thought and the bad thought, the thought that leads to nirvana and the thought that doesn't, and you do something with it. So I'm curious about that activity rather than just observation. Would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, no, well, that would be right, because certainly craving is what the Buddha finished with. He's finished with craving was really the hallmark of his enlightenment in a way, because a Buddha doesn't, or an arahant person doesn't crave anymore in the same way that a person with what you might just call ordinary consciousness would. Trying to think of because the consciousness that an arahant person has is supramundane, as I was explaining before. It's not mundane consciousness anymore. So craving, yeah, but it's something you can sort of notice too, and because you can notice it in your meditation. You can notice the way, that's why am I desiring, the way that I'm desiring. We were talking about this in the meditation itself, why I'm going out to sort of grasp onto this thing, or why do I want this, or why is that causing me trouble? Moment, why is it keeping me from being still and being peaceful? But the investigation, in investigating though, you can, and you should too, probably you will start to see different ways that you can set things up in your life to offset what some of these troubling things are. There's a whole list of things which I don't think I can remember to tell you about now, but a list of 10 parameters that I'm not sure. I think it was the Buddha's list, but these parameters, are things that you can sort of set against, your troublesome things. That, like for instance, if what's just coming to my mind now is the Buddha was giving a dissertation on for monks who were craving or lusting. Lust was in their minds. And then he kind of described a way that you could sort of deal with that lust by I'm sort of somewhat embarrassed to really to speak about this, but then this isn't the sutras, they're just the same, so I'll just sort of say it. I know Ajahn Brahm would just say it. So he said if you're lusting after a woman, you know, and you've got a particular, if you're a man, and that's the opposite way for a woman to a man, I guess, too. If you're lusting after a woman, he said the first thing you should do is take the layer of skin off her body in your mind, and then look at her there. And if that's hasn't sort of dampened your ardour, then remove all the blood vessels and the blood and everything like that, and come down to there, and then remove the organs and get back down to the skeleton. And then starting, so, you know, what he's doing there in that investigation is really he's trying to balance the lust that he was seeing in probably some of his monks at the time that he gave that particular talk. But there's many ways that you can use investigation in that way to find things, especially in the parameters, you know, because there's things like being honest. How can you practice? Or, you know, especially there's one that I kind of noticed in myself when I first came here, because I used to love meditation. I always fell in love with it right from the start, and at the beginning I seemed to be quite good at it. But it's, you know, as you sort of settle into it, then it sort of got a bit harder. I was finding all these little obstacles, but I noticed at the time there was, because the community was very different then. There was a distinctive Asian community, and there was a distinctive English community. And the English people seemed to really like the meditation. They were always here in the hall meditating. But the Asian people, they just used to like giving to the monks. They'd be here for the dhanas and you know, absolutely so generous, you know, just giving all of this. And I'd look at them and I'd say, yeah, but you're not meditating. You don't meditate. And, you know, I was sort of really boosting myself up because I was kind of meditating and they weren't necessarily. But then when I started to sort of not do so well with my meditation, I realised how mingy my mind was, how kind of, you know, that I wasn't kind of developing at all in the way of the ways of generosity, the way that these people are. Just natural generosity, just giving. And you know, and I mean, I didn't get involved in things like that so much because I just, you know, I thought meditation's the way to do it. But the thing that happened then too, Ajahn Jagara at the time, he asked me to be a marriage celebrant for the society, and I thought, oh God, why would I want to do that? I don't like ceremony. But anyway, I trusted him enough to think that he must have thought that I needed it or something. And so I did become the marriage celebrant for the Buddhist Society there, and it really took only just one or two marriages just to see the beauty and the, you know, the feeling, the generosity and everything that's around things like that, like around the marriages and how they're people work together, just the beauty of the love that people have for each other and the way that they kind of are wanting to live their lives together and create families and things like that. It was really quite wonderful just for me to sort of, just to see how miserable my mind was, really. And, you know, as that started to turn, then so my meditation sort of improved a bit too. So you can use the investigation to set these. Generosity, of course, is one of the parameters as well. So, yeah, I hope that answers you reasonably well.
Dennis, I just had a quick question about, you know, enhancing our meditation, and, you know, it's often what we do off the cushion that can also really have benefit to our meditations. And I just wondered, other than meditation itself and giving, you know, speaking kind words, acknowledging, you know, where your mind, if your mind is seeing truth or delusion, what are some other things that we can do off the cushion, some practical strategies for us in the room that can really help us deepen our practice and our experiential understanding?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's probably very wide and deep too, really, when you start to look at that. But I would certainly think, though, that the more you can look out into the world, well let me just come back again and just say that there's a collective consciousness out there, and there's also our own personal consciousness. Our personal consciousness is sort of fed, I guess, by the collective consciousness, but the collective consciousness will always override your personal consciousness. I mean, there are times, you know, when I sort of think about this. You think of someone maybe like Hitler, and because he must have had such a strong mind that it sort of influenced really the whole of a country. But that's quite rare. You know, you don't often see people doing that so much. It's the collective consciousness usually is, you know, what holds sway. But when you realise that you've got your own personal consciousness and stream of consciousness going through, and you start to see the way that you're conditioned, you start to see the way that you react into different situations, and you start to see what you need to do to, to fix or remedy those problems that you've got. It's that kind of consideration into your own personal consciousness is what really is important, because in the end, you need to allow everything that comes into your consciousness. You need to be able to accept it all, good and bad, all the dukkha that's coming into your personal consciousness. It's not trying to annihilate anything at all, not trying to get rid of it, but just accepting. And just as the words here in the front there are saying, just being kind. Eddie's little contribution here in the front. Just learning to be kind, and I guess the other thing that comes out of that is really then you start to see how it's relationships that are really the key to all of this. Relationships allow you to see what's going on between the materiality that's sort of built, like the relationship between a husband and a wife. Just that, Ajahn Brahms, just about every marriage that I ever did with him, he talks about, now that you are married, you're no longer important. She's no longer important. What's important? And what's important is we, the relationship. It's not I or you or me. It's the relationship that you're looking at, the relationship that you're working on, not working on me or you. It is always the relationship. And in fact, that's really so true too in the way that consciousness builds all these systems of the world. They're all, I like to study all that, so I won't go too far. That I'll probably, it gets a bit tedious too. Not for me, but there's non-linear systems that are built, and non-linear systems are beginningless and endless, and they're everywhere. They're inside our body, everywhere. Every part of the world has these systems that are symbiotically built by the consciousness of the mind, and we need really to be able to. Once you sort of see that, and you can see, say, this building as a material form, and see our bodies as a material form, it's probably best then just to sort of, okay, this building's built as it is, so that we'll just leave that as it is. Don't think about that anymore. That's inside knowledge. My body's built as it is. That's inside knowledge. But when I'm relating with someone or something, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's this piece of wood or an animal or whatever I'm relating to, that is where the sensation will arise. That sensation we're talking about at the start in the meditation, That's where that sensation arises. And the awareness of that sensation is really the only thing that's important. The awareness of sensation between that we're relating with. So all this has got, there's relationships going on everywhere in this building to hold it all together. Relationships in this world that's holding it all together, that are there. But it's best not to sort of think too much about that, because it doesn't sort of bring you to the present moment. What brings you to the present moment is just to forget all that, or see all this as empty, and just see the way we relate to this building, or the way I relate to my wife, or the way that I relate to friends and people in the Buddhist society and people in the world. But in my own personal consciousness, it is dependent on me personally to be able to accept everything that comes to me. The Buddha even talked about, like, even if there's two people sawing you with a two-handed saw and they're sawing you in half, with malice even, but your responsibility is to think of them with loving kindness. Pretty hard. But nonetheless, that's how he taught, and because it is the relationship. The moment you start making judgments about not accepting someone, the moment you start making judgments about things and people and so on, you're creating a burden for yourself. It's always a burden to carry. So we try not to pick up too many burdens.
Oh, Dennis, thanks for the more than excellent talk. Yeah. Now coming back to what you talked tonight, okay, you talk about Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then you mentioned about the 12 links, the law of dependent recognition. You talk about the 7 factors towards enlightenment. Bojjhangas, my question is, okay, don't you think Satipatthana, okay, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that is the heart of the Buddhist teaching and practice. Okay, the heart. Let me tell you. I know you answered. Okay, why I think, and then you. Okay,
Okay.
Why is the heart? Because it's dealing directly with our emotions. With our disturbing whenever there's any. There's suffering. There's a suffering. Whenever there's any disturbing emotion, feeling this thing. Okay. Oh, you think of the mind. Okay, affecting feeling, and something happening, the phenomena. Like. That's causing, okay? Once you know this already, okay, you are in control of the situation. If you don't know this thing, you are lost. You go to see the doctors, all this Medicaid, like they give it to you all, Once you know this, you are under control, and that is the heart of the Buddhist teaching and practice. That's what I feel. What do you think?
I think I can quite easily agree with you there, Eddie. It's it is at the heart of it all.
Yeah,
and actually, because the Satipatthana's, mindfulness is always forming a context around whatever it's providing a context with all of that you're relating to, Whereas concentration, samadhi, is sort of taking you deep into the. Right into the depths of what feeling and the sensations in the world are. But mindfulness is very important.
Yeah, you know why I say this? In my journey in Buddhism, I've been led round and round and round and round. They don't tell you, They give talk and thing, till I find this Satipatthana, feelings, your thought, and that sort of, how do I say, helps me, That is what that is the truth, helps with my problem.
Yeah, I agree, Eddie. Always,
I don't know whether you
always
understand this.
wise
Huh?
words from Eddie.
Yeah, that's why each time for me, any problem, this thing, I think, oh, the mind is a forerunner of all states, you know. I look into my mind, oh, there's something, you know. Sometimes you don't, you know, it's hidden, you don't know, you know, that you have some negative thinking, you know, which affects your feeling, you know. Then
That's right.
If you correct it, you leave it longer, this thing, it becomes stress, anxiety, and depression comes, this thing, you know. Yeah. So you have to be able to watch this thing, and you know, like a small problems goes through, big problems make it take longer time, impermanence, it goes through too, I think. Comes back to Satipatthana.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Dennis.
I think anyone else? We'll wrap it up. Thanks, Bill. We'll just bow 3 times to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha for those who would like to. And thank you very much all for your patient listening. Thank you.